I feel like I've made it back to about 95% of normal. They immediately get a worried look on their face and don't let me finish the sentence, and they say, but that's pretty good. And if they let me finish the sentence, I would say I'm back to about 95%, and that is absolutely miraculous. It's wonderful. A couple people said, are you taller? Well, I am taller. Yeah, so total hip replacement was just miraculous. Good morning. I'm thrilled to have a crowd this size. Great. Our little classes during open houses are not meant to be in-depth. You know, we expect them to run a minimum of 15 minutes. How long do I usually run, Lydia? Like 3 hours? No. No, I usually run at least 30 minutes or sometimes a bit longer. The topic is spring blooming perennials for the shade garden. It's kind of a difficult topic this late in spring because the peak of the spring bloom in the shade garden is over. The shade gardens are gorgeous this time of year and all summer long with beautiful foliage. But I ran around yesterday and today and, where's my little list? Anyhow, I think I could do without it. And I realized there's quite a few things still in bloom in the shade garden. When we talk about shade, we have a whole spectrum from really bright shade to really dark shade. And, you know, the heavier the shade, the less things bloom. And you become more dependent on the most shade tolerant plants that are generally more foliage plants like cast iron plant or hostas and stuff. But I'll highlight quite a few things that are blooming in shade. And I'm standing here with this geranium, and it's here to remind me to make a point. In any group of plants, or not any group, but many groups of plants, you might think you know how to grow an iris, a bearded iris, and therefore you know how to grow all iris. But that's not the case, because like in iris or geraniums and other groups of plants, there's some that want sun and some that want shade. So even though you might think that all geraniums want sun, there are some really good ones for the shade garden. Years ago, I was gardening for a homeowner, and he thought I was an absolute idiot when I suggested a geranium for his shade garden. Clearly, I didn't know what I was talking about. But they got planted, and he was pleased with them when they bloomed their heart out, and maybe thought I was a little less of an idiot. Okay, so who is this geranium? It's geranium macrorhizome, meaning big rhizome, and this is the rhizome. It doesn't seem to ever have much root system. It's an evergreen geranium. The foliage is very strongly pine-scented, and geraniums are something that deer often eat, but I grew this in a client's garden, a different client who didn't think I was so stupid, who had tremendous pressure from deer, and so we tend to plant just things that the deer didn't eat. And I think because this has a strong pine scent, they didn't eat it, whereas they ate other geraniums like the ones we grow in sun that bloom in the summertime. I'll pass it around and feel free to brush the leaf and smell it. It smells a little bit like pine air freshener, which is not a fragrance I like. And it doesn't bloom through the summer months, but it has a long period of bloom in late spring. About now it's still in bloom. That might be the typical color, but it's also other shades of pink like pale pink and also white. And there's a really super hybrid between it and another species. The hybrid is Cantabrigiense, which means from Cambridge essentially. And there's several cultivars of that. There's a really good white one, Biakova. And it's sort of a smaller scale plant, but it's a sterile hybrid, and I think because of that it blooms a really long time. Now, I'm going to talk about this plant so I don't have to carry it for the rest of the tour. But this is, oh, it's a plant that Elizabeth Lawrence wrote about in a southern garden in the 1940s. And in that time, we've known it by a bunch of different names, including Calamaris and Aster romea. But the taxonomists have settled and decided it's just an aster. All the things that are still in the genus aster are from other parts of the world, not North America, but this is a great plant you can grow in full sun or light shade. It's just starting to bloom today. This is one of the few stems that was starting to bloom, but it will bloom all summer long into early fall. So that's a superb, I'll just hand it to you and then you can pass it around. Oh, okay, let me go put this down. Oh, and I might say, this plant might make you scared that it's a rampant spreader. It doesn't spread enough. So in the client's garden, I would dig up a clump every winter, divide it down into single stems and spread it out further because it doesn't spread fast. Okay. Now, a lot of plants that do well in shade also do well in sun. And we're going to step over here just to talk about one of them. This is the little fern-leafed bleeding heart, Dicentra exemia. It's an East Coast native. Most of the forms in the nursery trade don't like our summers, but this is a seed strain that was collected in dolly sods. I think that's in the mountains in Tennessee, and it just grows superbly for us. It's actually not supposed to be in this garden. It finds its way around, but it'll bloom all summer. Up by the grapevine bed, it's out in full sun and you know, just growing real robustly. This soil is really lean on more normal soil. It's a bigger, more robust plant. And in the wild, it would normally grow in shade and bloom quite well in shade. Okay. There are many Solomon seals, and they're happiest in a shade garden. They'll grow in full sun, but then the foliage looks pretty tired, doesn't want to be out in the full sun. Many of them are already done blooming. This is a late blooming one. This is Polygonatum lazianthum. I don't know anything about this guy, but really good plants for the shade garden. This is a native mint family member. The mint family is that huge family with salvia and lavender and oregano and thyme and so many things, but this is Blophilia, the hairy wood mint, and it's just starting to bloom. It looks a bit like Monarda in bloom, but it's definitely a shade plant, well, shade to part sun plant. I think there aren't a lot of things blooming in the shade garden once the trees leaf out, because pollinators tend to stay out in the sunny parts of the garden. Now late summer, early fall, there's a big flush of bloom. Things like some of the shade tolerant salvias and begonias and stuff. The heucheras and foam flowers are blooming. This is one of the modern, yeah, it's a heucherella, but little spikes of flowers. They are pollinated, as you might imagine, by tiny little insects, but they are blooming in the garden. Foam flower and heuchera are closely enough related that you can cross the two. Oh, there's another heuchera with chartreuse leaves blooming. That the hybrid are heucherella. Okay, of course.
Does that mint spread like my spearmint that goes everywhere?
Okay.
No.
I was wondering
Well,
the same thing. Yeah.
See, the plant families take their name from the first name. Families are made up of genera, the plural of genus. And the plant families take their name from the first name genus, which was, well, the mint family is an exception. And so when we talk about the mint family, I really don't like that common name, because you say mint and people turn around and run out of the garden screaming, because everyone knows that mint spreads like mint.
Yeah.
But no, it doesn't. Our engraved labels have the year that something was planted. Well, this was planted 2 years ago in 23. So in 23 and 24, that's as big as it's gotten. Chloranthus aren't quite yet in bloom.
Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous. Yeah.
Turn those green buds into small white flowers. They're more than showy enough for me. They might not be showy for something that wants, all flowers to look like modern bearded irises or lilies, but it's a lovely thing. We have learned that we need to cut the flower stalks off, a couple months from now before the seed is dropped, because we get lots of seedlings. The gardeners have weeded them out, but you're left with this gorgeous foliage. So it's one of those things that's beautiful in bloom, but then the foliage is entirely worthwhile.
Is it evergreen or go in the winter?
It's deciduous. It disappears in the winter. Yeah, I should try to remember to say that. What did we cover? The geranium, I think I said, was evergreen. Geraniums vary. Some species are deciduous, others are evergreen. The aster disappears in the winter. While in the foam flowers, the tiarella and the heucheras are largely evergreen. This is a relative of the foam flower and the heuchera, strawberry begonia or strawberry geranium, though it's neither a geranium or a begonia. You might know it as a houseplant, fully winter hardy here, beautiful evergreen foliage, and the bloom display is really pretty this time of year. We do need to cut the flower stalks after it's done blooming, not to prevent seeding. I don't know, I don't remember ever seeing a seedling of it, just to tidy it up, because when they're done blooming, they eventually turn sort of raggedy brown. I think the fact that it's called strawberry geranium is it runs with runners over the surface of the soil. So it's not, I don't consider it a rampant thing, and I wouldn't plant it in amongst your miniature hosta collection, but it's a really good ground cover between bigger things. This is another shade-loving geranium. This is the morning widow because of the somber color. Some of the selections of, well, you see this bumblebee is enjoying the flower. Some of the selections of geranium phaeum are close to being black. I think this is the cultivar Samabar. In the winter and early spring, before it puts up the flower stalks, it has big burgundy markings on the foliage, but it's definitely a shade garden plant. And it's about done, but you can see, it's bloomed all up the whole length of these flower stalks. So not maybe the absolutely showiest geranium, but it's in bloom for a long time in the shade garden. The acanthus, the bear's breeches, prefer a lightly shaded area. They're so tough that they would survive in the sun, but the plants get really tired looking, but they're best in a lightly shaded area. This would have sun first thing in the morning and maybe again late in the afternoon, but it's mostly in bright shade most of the day. You grow them as much for the foliage, but the flower display is quite dramatic. This one I think is, yeah, summer beauty. I guess whoever named it didn't live in this climate, but you know, because it's at its best in early May. The floral display lasts for quite a while. Now, acanthus is one of those plants. Do you ever propagate a dandelion? Not intentionally, but you know if you don't get the whole root out, it'll regrow. Acanthus has that same ability. Most plants don't come back from pieces of the root, but the acanthus does. If you decided to transplant this plant, unless you went through the soil with a sieve, I'm sure, you know, in a year's time there'd be lots of young plants coming back from the roots. If we had a real dry summer in an unirrigated garden, the foliage can go dormant come summer, but then they put up all new foliage in the fall. It's a real Mediterranean plant that deals with hot, dry summers by going dormant. If we have enough moisture through the summer, they don't go dormant, but they will tolerate a hot, dry summer by going dormant and then refreshen and look good for a good part of the winter. The foliage will get damaged when we have a cold spell, but then quickly regrow. Behind you is a great native woodland perennial, the little green and gold. The typical color is more this brighter gold. This pale yellow is a selection. You know, they're never a showstopper. But a lot of things that aren't showstoppers, they make up for not being a showstopper by blooming for months. And you know, this is in the aster family with the composite family. And in my experience, deer eat many members of that family, but I have found that deer in a woodland garden thick with deer, the native chrysogonum managed to, you know, bloom all summer long. That's about as tall as it goes. We used to think there was just one species, and some are clump formers, others are runners, and now the botanists have chopped up that species into several, but you know, some selections will be a stay-put little clump and others will run at a modest rate. And then there's eco-lacquered spider, which would, if we planted it here today, would be knocking you over in 5 minutes. I'm of course exaggerating, but eco-lacquered spider is a great plant if you had a big woodland and you needed something to cover the ground quickly.
Doug,
yes.
can I ask about a tree?
Yes.
What is that blooming right there?
The big broadleaf evergreen?
Yes.
It's a holly. A holly with purplish flowers. It's Ilex chinensis.
It's the oldest one I've ever seen.
Yeah. It being a female has a really beautiful fruit display come winter. And most hollies have white flowers, but that ones are sort of purplish. And hollies are really good plants for wildlife support because pollinators love the flowers. I can see somebody flying up there. And then the birds love the fruit in late winter. Yeah.
Need a pollinator?
Yeah, hollies I believe all are either male or female. They're dioecious. But some of them will produce fruit if they're pollinated by any other holly, not necessarily their same species, because I don't think we have a male chinensis in the garden. But it makes a huge fruit display every winter. Penstemons are a group where they come from many different growing environments. The largest number of penstemons are native to the Rocky Mountains, where there's sun and very sharply drained soil and fairly dry climate. But this is one of the modern selections or hybrids of our local native Penstemon digitalis that it does very well in a part sun or lightly shaded area. It also will grow in absolute full sun. The local forms usually have white flowers. These are the modern, there are a lot of modern selections with purple foliage. They bloom just this time of year, extended period of time. I think the seed pods are really beautiful. We tend to cut them off so we don't get seedlings from them. But then the plant makes a basal rosette of foliage that's bright burgundy all winter long, so that's a really nice asset of the plant. Okay, we'll head this way. I don't know if the title of this class said spring blooming herbaceous perennials, because shrubs and trees are perennials too. They're woody perennials with permanent stems, and certainly it's the beginning of hydrangea season. This is a modern hybrid of our native mountain hydrangea, Hydrangea serrata, which is typically a white lace cap, but this is a modern form with a mop head of pink flowers. Let's see, it's one of, the cultivar they have on that is Spirit. I think the name is Invincible Spirit. And oh my goodness. A little lady slipper that decided to be part of the tour today. This is Philip. There's a real pretty lady slipper in bloom in the original garden up front that you can see today. It's sort of in the far corner of the property. But this is Philip. It's a man-made hybrid, and a lot of the hybrid lady slipper orchids are a lot easier to grow than some of the wild species, and because they're modern hybrids and are not being collected from the wild because they don't exist in the wild, you're not contributing to the over-collecting of native species. There are a lot in the garden, but most of them are done blooming already. Of course, there's late blooming azaleas. This is a little bit past its peak. It's one of the Satsuki azaleas. Satsuki is Japanese for fifth month. If you need the cultivar name, it's on the label, Tama no Hada. Most people, well, they used to be a super common plant in the nursery trade, the Gumpo azaleas. They're a Satsuki as well. But a lot of them are chimeras. Chimeras are those mythical beasts that were made of many different body parts. And it's applied to plants that have what Cliff Parks called the stutter gene. One day the gene is saying, let's be a white flower, and then the next day it says, let's be a solid pink flower, or let's be, a striped flower. So they're, maybe look, there's even this variation as well, where it's white margined. Some camellias do that same thing. It's a fun thing. Alrighty. Oh, it's past its peak.
Looks like a corpse flower.
It is essentially that. Probably by now everybody has either seen in person or on the local news the corpse flower that looks very much like that, but is about this tall. This is the same genus. The genus is Amorphophallus. The corpse flower is Amorphophallus Lord, I'm tongue-tied this morning. Titanum, meaning titan, giant, but this is a little Japanese species, Morphophallus cucusianum, and it's a big genus, and there are a fair number of species that are winter hardy here. You're welcome. No, I can't. Yeah, it smells pretty bad. You'll just have to take my word for it, because I can't have everybody trumping back in here. But if it was a little bit warmer, you'd probably all be smelling it. They're only in bloom for about 3 to 5 days. And I think this one is going by. But this one, the flower is replaced by a spike of fruit that is showier than the floral display. The fruit are green for most of the summer, but late summer, early fall, they start to color up. They first turn fuchsia, purple, and then turn cobalt blue. So at one point you have both colors on the spike of fruit. Let's go down. I want to point out the Raymania because it's a great shade garden plant. Oh, okay. How does this one smell? It's close enough you could smell it. It's fairly mild. I invite you to smell it. Yeah. I dragged you over here to show you this plant. I don't need to tell you it's a spreader, but you know, some plants are in bloom for a week and still want to take over the garden. This is a spreader, but it'll be in bloom, you know, it's been in bloom for already most of a month, and it'll have a fair amount of bloom all summer long. It's the Chinese foxglove because of its resemblance to the common foxglove, but it's not a related plant. And the genus is Raymania, named for somebody named Rehmannia, Rehmannia. So, you know, a worthwhile plant for the lightly shaded garden. This spot, it would get a fair amount of sun early in the morning, but then it's shade the rest of the day. You know, well, this is sun. Sort of a few steps from here, it's bright shade, but as we get in sort of the center there, I consider that dark shade. And there's just a couple other things I want to show you if you're willing. These two plants stopped me. This is Cyclamen purpurascens. It's sort of the outlier in the genus Cyclamen in that most of the cyclamen are Mediterranean origin, so they grow through the fall and winter and now are going dormant. But this is Cyclamen purpurascens, meaning becoming purple, and it's native to the Swiss Alps, where it's probably buried under snow all winter and then grows all summer long. And so it doesn't want the Mediterranean climate where it's dry in the summer with average moisture, you know, where hostas would be happy. It'll bloom all summer, and the foliage is really beautiful as well. And I just noticed that epimediums are primarily earlier in spring, but some of the modern hybrids bloom for an extended period of time. And they're handsome foliage plants, and then the flowers are a real treat. And you know, I'm always reluctant to say deer don't eat them. Do they eat them in your garden? Yeah, including albinos. Oh, Campanula porcharskianum is a little low spreading campanula. A lot of the campanulas don't do well in the south, but this one does really well. It's past its peak of bloom and actually could be grown in quite a bit more sun, but it's quite good here. Porcharskianum, here's a label if you need the spelling. It's just somebody's family name, you know, Joe Blow Porcharski. Sundrops, the Enothera, Tetragrona or Enothera, I think I've known it under different names. It's one of the evening primroses, but it's one that's not evening blooming. You know, you have a big genus, the genus gets the same common name as one member of the genus, but it often doesn't apply because the true evening primroses don't open until about 7 at night, and you can stand there and watch them open because they open really quickly. It's fascinating to watch, and they look a lot like this, but they're as I say, don't open till about 7 o'clock, and they'll still be open early in the morning, but then quickly fade. But sundrops are open all day long. I don't know if they close at night, but you know, in bloom for almost 2 months this time of the year. We cut the flower stalks down at some point after they're done blooming when they're no longer attractive, and then they make a basal foliage, so it almost looks like a ground cover of ajuga for the rest of the year, because when it's out of bloom it doesn't leave a blank spot in the garden. It's a local native as well. I grew up with this plant, so we've known each other for a long time. Clematis will do fairly well in light shade. That's Clematis integrifolia, which is not a viner, it's just a short, sprawling plant. And our last plant. A few of you come around. This is a plant you sort of have to see up close because it's very dully colored. This is an iris. This is Iris fetidissima, meaning not just fetid, but very fetid. Fetid is an English word spelled F-E-T-I-D, meaning smelling bad, like, oh, that cheese is so fetid. And you don't grow it for its flowers. What you grow it for, they make a great big seed pod, about that size. And when it splits open in the fall, the seeds inside are bright scarlet red, and they'll hang on the plant for, maybe 2 months or so. So that's the reason why you grow it. It's also largely evergreen, though it looks like it needs a lot of cleaning up. And the thing that's fetid, and I never get much stink out of it, is the foliage. If you crush the foliage, of course, this is a English native, so they call it stinking Gladwin or beefsteak plant. It does, to my nose, smell a little bit like beef, but I don't find it terribly offensive by any means. So it's in full bloom. Some of you further away might want to see it once you have room. And I'll pass that around as well. But very, very drought tolerant. Definitely a shade garden plant, unlike many iris, but sort of a fun plant. Okay. Well, I said that was our last plant. Amsonia, most of the Amsonia are done blooming. They will thrive in full sun, but in the wild you'll see them in a woodland garden where they don't perform as strongly as they do out in sun, but they can be worthwhile in a lightly shaded garden. And I think bigger issue with a lot of shade gardens is that they're often very dry because they're competing with the trees. So that's often more the limiting factor, because you can go through, I don't know, let's say 5 acres of shade gardens here today, and you'll see there's no end of plants that do well in a shade garden. But if we weren't irrigating at all, a lot of the things wouldn't be glorious, because they might persist in the shade garden but not be quite as satisfactory if they had to put up with the long dry summer. And you know, we zipped through the gardens. We didn't talk about any of the things that we grow for foliage, like hostas and ferns and stuff, but they're really the backbone of the shade garden through the summer months. You can certainly fortify them with some flowering annuals, you know, like begonias and impatiens and stuff like that. Any questions before we stop? All right. Well, thank you very much.
I see you're taping.
Yeah.
Is this something we can watch later?
Yes, that's, yeah, if we're taping it, it's on our YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And Lydia, I think, does a good job of not getting people in the cameras. Is that so? Yeah, we try. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming out today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
It does have a